Hi there, and welcome to this month's edition of Real Estate Matters with Clare Girton and myself, Ayse Clare. This is a show about matters in real estate, that real estate matters, of course, and is important, and how real estate affects us and our local neighborhoods. For some, real estate is the largest investment. So both Clare and I are residential realtors focused right here on the main line and surrounding areas. And we continue to be, right, in interesting times in the market, in the real estate market that is. We have some rising interest rates, some low inventory, things are changing a bit, we'll say post-COVID. And our shows aim to bring you actual stories and scenarios and some terms that might assist, right, in understanding of residential real estate. So we hope to mix in a little bit of humor as well. So good to see you, Clare.
Ayse, always good to see you. Thanks for meeting me here again today to dive into our topic today. I think the last time we did a show, we did working with buyers and buyer consultation, and we thought, well, that would be a great segue for us to really talk about sellers and meeting with sellers and, you know, setting expectations and what we call in our profession a listing consultation. I know that you do lots of listing consultations. I do listing consultations, and I thought we could do that today, sort of talk about what that looks like for each of us and for our profession and for sellers, and how some inside of, you know, how that goes and what sellers could expect from a listing consultation.
Wonderful, yeah.
This one thing that I think a good place we could start is we both think it's pretty important. So could you kind of start us off and tell us about, you know, why is a listing consultation so important?
Yeah, I think some people, you know, some people who haven't delved into real estate too much, they think, okay, hey, realtor, what is my home worth? And, you know, can we get it on the market?
Yeah.
Well,
can we sign the paper?
Like a great scenario, though.
Yeah. Can we sign the paper today?
Yeah. However, I feel like there's so much more that goes into that from our end and from their end. You know, sometimes it's a shorter time frame, sometimes longer time frame. But yes, we both agree that a pre-listing, or I should say listing consultation, is important. And then I also say something about a pre-listing consultation. But a listing consultation to me is so important because there's so much information I want to know from the home sellers about, you know, why they're planning to move, things of that nature. I have so many questions. Why are you calling me now, right? And understanding where they're at in hopes to meet them where they're at. I'm not going to go too much into about myself. That can come later, but really understand, you know, what's going on with them that had them pick up the phone or send me an email to discuss. Yeah. How about you? Why do you feel like a listing consultation is so important?
Well, similarly to you, you know, it's about the sellers, you know, so where I think it's so important, it's because it is an opportunity for us to meet them where they are. So if they're calling us, or if we go out to visit, or, you know, both, or you're having a conversation with prospective seller, and you realize that their story and what's happening in their life is really the motivation for selling. So that can be a lot of things, right? So I feel that listing appointment is so important to say, what is motivating you to sell? And what is that? And it can be, you know, we have an expression in our industry, which is moving away from pain or moving toward pleasure. And it can be a little bit of both. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today, I think. But so that's why it's really important for me to be face-to-face. I we'll talk on the phone a lot too, but you really do get the whole story, or better chance, I guess, opportunity of especially when you're meeting a seller in their home, in their property.
So you're saying face-to-face is really going to get you more of a story of what's happening in their life.
For sure, especially in an opportunity to see their property. You may not know some things about their property until you start asking some of the inventory of questions that we prepare and bring, until you get out there into their property, and then, you find out things that you might not have. Otherwise.
Yeah. And so speaking of the listing consultation, we kind of disseminated some realtors will hear of a need from maybe a past client, somebody they weren't even ready to hear from, or they don't even know yet, and say, hey, can you help me? I'm thinking about home selling. We talked about your goal, or your I guess train of thought is, hey, when can we meet in person to really start talking about this? Where we were saying, I have like a more formalized or format. I'm looking for an initial phone call. Not one is right or wrong. It's just how we tend to go about our business. So we were delving into some of the pre-listing consultation, I guess I should call it, that we would do on the phone. And it's really for collecting information. I think it's fact-finding, right? More or less of, I should say, less of what I'm going to say. I'm not looking to answer many questions on that call, but really delve into what's going on in their world, and then followed up with an in-person appointment, which we'll get to more of those details.
So let's say this again, just so I want to hear you clearly. So the way you mostly work is you get on the phone and you have some questions that you beforehand, and then you go out to the home and delve into those questions.
Yes, ideally, even if they say, well, we're not thinking about this for maybe another year. We're just starting, dipping our toe into what this might look like. I still want to get a chance to, and some agents will say, hey, I'll get with you in 6 months. Some of us say, hey, no, I want to meet in person.
Even if you're not going to sell for...
Absolutely. Even if you're not going to sell for a year, I still want to see you in person. I still want to see your home in person, so that when they are ready, we are ready, right?
Sure.
And maybe we'll have to do a little bit of tweaking for time frame in the background.
And value and all those things, and what's happened to the market and the house. But
Absolutely.
But I agree, it is worthwhile. Even, I have clients that have, they decided not to sell, and it was still valuable.
The appointment.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, for sure.
Because they then had a better picture of what they wanted, and that is valuable. So it doesn't always turn into, we're going to list it next week or next month. It can be a different time path.
For sure.
And I still think that is valuable.
Perhaps the market's not where they want it to be. Maybe from a price standpoint, a time standpoint. Yeah, that's a great point.
But it is important that I think sellers get to know that we are most interested in what is good for them.
Yeah, for sure. So we wanted to talk about some of the questions and information we're collecting, maybe at the appointment or prior to meeting up with the home sellers.
However we get this information, this is super important.
Absolutely. We have more questions, but we narrowed it down to a couple that we thought were maybe key, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one key piece is why, right? It's almost like those basic questions: why, where, when.
So true. How? Yes.
Yeah, but why do they have this idea that they do want to home sell? Maybe in today's market or soon thereafter.
What do you see your clients, your sellers? What is the most reason why people want to sell?
Yeah, it runs the gamut.
Yeah,
but
sure does.
Some things that I'm just thinking of, we're working on right now.
Yeah.
Someone's having a baby, right? So they're wanting a bit more space. Maybe they were renting, or perhaps they had their initial home and didn't quite, we need a little bit more space. We anticipate this baby's going to come with a lot of stuff, which they do. So that
2-bedroom condo might not be.
Perhaps, or could be for a little while longer.
Sure.
Right, and then maybe they're going to feel that pain of, oh, we're too tight here. So that's more like a joyful, okay, they're going to be moving up. And then one that I'm working on right now is where a parent has passed away. And that's filled with so much emotion.
Sure.
And depending on the situation can be very challenging, you know, most of the case when somebody has passed. So
I recently did one where they were not passed away, but a couple who had raised their family for 50 years in their home.
That's not typical either, to stay in a home for 50 years.
50 years. So they had 50 years of raising kids who are now parents themselves. So we had, you know, adult children involved in the process. And besides finding the place for them to downsize and a place that was going to be safe, you know, what was that going to take to take care of all the things that have been collected in that home of 50 years.
Yeah.
And the vendors that go along with that.
I would imagine for somebody who hasn't, you know, bought or sold in 50 years, that everything you just said would be like moving mountains.
And emotional, right?
Without a doubt.
Even though it was at the end when we got all through and it took several months to get there, there is definitely freedom on the other side of that, which was a safe place for both of this couple to live, who were in their 80s, and where they could feel like not overwhelmed by literally physically living in a nice, clean, safe place without stairs. You get the picture. Yeah. But then to leave a house that they have so many memories in. So I enjoy that part of the job, which is people's stories, really.
For sure.
But it doesn't necessarily always come easily.
Definitely. And we were talking about a couple other scenarios, like one being perhaps someone's moving for a work relocation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we were talking about basically it all boils down to why selling is, to your point, moving away from pain or moving towards pleasure. And we're saying sometimes it's a bit of both, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes I think in this market that we've seen, since we've been inventory low and we've have high prices, I think people have considered listing because they think now's the window, and that can cause them a little bit of, you know, hesitation, if you will, because
so you're saying they're coming to the table just for the opportunity.
And then what does that look like? Right? Because where do you go after that? And
that's a great question.
I think there is a place. There is always a place after that. I think we can find those things, but getting people to work through that is a big part of this process.
For sure. So, okay, why selling? That was a big piece to talking to a home seller. What else do we have?
Just to finish that, why selling, we do ask other questions along those lines to get a really clear picture, right, of why they're selling. And once we get to that point, then comes the next kind of big question, I feel, which is, all right, time frame.
And why could time frame be so important?
Yeah, and why could time frame be so important? Differs for everybody, right? So, just like we had talked about earlier, is do you have someplace to go? Do you know I'm moving into this apartment, or I'm moving into this, I found a house much bigger for our family, whatever it is. So if that's in place, that might make the time go a little bit quicker. Or I don't know.
I have no idea. You tell me where I'm going.
Or there's other things that come up. I'm getting a new job and I want to wait. Or I want to sell now before I have to, I want to buy now before I get a new job. Or all those factors come into place. So tell me a little bit, Ayse, how do you like work with that time frame? Do you kind of set a place on the calendar?
Oh, good question. I think sometimes it depends on the type of personality I'm dealing with. Right. Some people need that structure or that goal to work towards. Right. And some folks are already goal oriented and can see kind of that all happen in place and have their, we're filling in some of the gaps for their to-do list for them. So it really depends. I really try to meet them where they are. If I can tell they seem a little scrambled, maybe we do put a tentative date and lay that out there so they can work towards something, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the things I have been trying to do on my listing consultations is, depending on the personality, but I actually get out the calendar. I actually copy pages of month of calendar that are blank. So it's just, if it were right now September, it would be October, November, December, January. If, we were getting there, and I'll say, tell me in a perfect world what this looks like on the calendar.
That's great.
Well, it's kind of amazing. Sometimes it matches up evenly, but sometimes it just gives them and a place to say, oh, well, think about it realistically in time frame.
Yeah, like could you realistically have all this packed up and mentally know where you're going, or are you feeling overwhelmed when you point to this date? Like, can I really do that and make it happen?
And I had a client say, I want it listed on this day, I want it sold on this day, and I want to move on this day. And sure enough, it actually helped me say, all right, let's see what we can do to get it done like that. And we got pretty close. So that's been fun.
And so one side piece to this, not to get off topic, but part of, vibing and talking to and getting some time in front of a home seller, and same for them, is to learn more about the personality style. So that person that you just spoke to is very D goal driven. They've got their game plan. Or is it going to be somebody who's maybe mucked in the weeds and you need to like paint the bigger picture for them?
Yeah, for sure.
Depends.
For sure.
So, okay, love it. So next up, I think another piece that we were talking about is, I love this kind of question, like, tell me about the story of you finding this home, or how did this home come into your perspective? Why did you choose this home? What did that look like for you 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 40 years ago? Why here? And I think it paints like a really interesting picture from a couple perspectives, because we can use some of that information perhaps for future marketing, and sometimes they'll give you tangibles to work with or intangibles. But it really gives you an idea of where they were at that time, and can really accentuate some of the positives about a property, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the part of the listing paperwork, as we know, is the seller's disclosure, which I always find to be a great document to at least reference, to leave with sellers, to say, here's this, tell the story of your physical story of your home, of what you know about it and and that helps kind of get started on that conversation of at least them thinking about, what is it, the thing that what did you love most? What space did you love most? And what space would you like to improve if you were going to stay? Or if you were thinking about, what you wanted to tackle, right? So that part of that listing, I think, is super helpful to really get kind of what actually physically happens in the house and what they love about it.
And one thing we had talked about,
what's challenging.
For sure. Some improvements that they've made over the time they've been there, what's been a challenge for them. And some home sellers, before we meet with them, have an idea of, okay, if I'm going to sell this home, I need to do X, Y, and Z. So I always ask, well, what improvements did you make? Right? What do you think you would make if you're going to stay? And sometimes those improvements that they make, maybe we really do need to do
right away
to list, depending on what market we're in.
Sure.
Or are they really not going to make a difference for a home buyer? So it's really good to hear, what's going on in their mind, because it could be like, don't even worry yourself about that. It's nothing to worry about. Or, yes, this is going to be a big concern. And maybe it's something that's not even on their radar that we need to bring up, later down the line.
I find sometimes there's a little bit of a tripping for sellers, because they see in their head what a potential could be, like, well, this could be finished and be a family room, or this could be an office, but it's not. And then they want to put the value on the finished space. So I find that to be kind of a funny conversation sometimes, is to say, well, yeah, if that was a pool or finished screened-in porch, that would add that value or whatever. Not necessarily a pool, but you know what I mean. So I always think that's a little fun to try to say, what exactly do we have here, rather than try to put a price tag on
potential.
Yeah.
Potential.
Do you ever find that?
Every now and then.
Every now and then.
Yeah, always have fun conversations, for sure. One other piece that we talked about that we felt was kind of fact-finding and important is, what are you looking for potential home seller in the realtor you choose? Like, what are your expectations? Because I often find maybe somebody who's more experienced in age is not so experienced in home selling, right? Maybe this is their first time home selling. I'm dealing with somebody right now, who's 50 plus category, and she's never sold a home. And so, okay, then we know we might need to take some baby steps, right? Or there might need to be some hand holding. So I think sometimes that question is going to bring out some of those pieces. To your point, those level of expectation. What do you find that home sellers are looking for, like in the realtor that they choose? What are some things that you can think of?
Well, for sure, I think your question is really important. Is, what do you, seller, want to see most? You want me to, do you want your realtor to call you every day to give you exactly what's happening in the market? Do you want your realtor to give you vendors to work with? Do you want, how do you want all of this paperwork to be gone over directly, or do you just want to do it by yourself? Is, just kind of working with the seller specifically with the process. This is what marketing can look like. Do you want things online? Right? I think it's just getting to know the seller's expectations. Then you can help them with what they expect.
I love that. I think that's so important because everyone's looking for, or so it seems, different pieces. Some say I'm just looking for, honesty and trust. Easy, Some say I'm looking for help on pricing more. And we're always trying to find those value-added pieces that they find a value, not that we find a value.
Absolutely.
Right? We can do a lot of things behind the scenes, but what is really important to them?
And I find I change with my sellers.
How so?
Well, because what is important for them may not be important for another seller. So I've been working harder at really trying to dig in and find out what it is that they most want.
Versus just assuming, as we can do sometimes.
Because it's easy to just say, well, this is how I work and this is what I do. And I find that actually is not as helpful.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Even though we have great processes.
Yeah, I was going to say, even though we can have that game plan
or
and some
framework.
Yeah. Okay, great. But I'm not really liking this part. Or tell me more about this. This sounds a little scary, or maybe I'm not interested in. So
I had a situation recently where the seller said, I don't want to know, about the negotiation, right?
Oh, interesting.
Like, I trust you. Go ahead. Do it. And it's very important to me. I know it is to you as well. I'm going to speak for you, is that, the negotiation is really about you, the seller and the buyer. What is your position? And so she had said that to me, but so I went ahead and was like, okay, well then you're going to probably be okay with whatever it was came down the negotiation. And when I went to tell her what it was, she wasn't okay with it. And I thought, oh, really good lesson. I knew that I wanted her, I needed her approval. I wanted her to know, but I thought she was not going to be that influenced by what the negotiation was, because she had said to me, I don't want to be involved, but she really did want to be involved.
Maybe, and perhaps she was looking for your guidance. She wanted to be involved, but hey, I'm going to really lean on you to help with.
But it was a very good reminder, because even though she was leaning on me to do the actual, okay, this is your position, but she realized that she really needed to make the decision, because it is her decision and the buyer's decision. So that was a good reminder to me too, because I was a little bit shocked by her, wait, I do care. And because I was expecting her to be like, whatever, go ahead and it's going to be fine, whatever it is.
Yeah. Great story.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So curious to move things along. When you're meeting, folks who are potential home sellers, do you do a two-step approach, or do you like to go in for one really hearty meeting? What does that look like for you, and what might you discuss during the meeting, the in-person meeting?
I I have done a two-step, which is usually let's talk on the phone, ask some basic questions out of our inventory of questions. I think I lean towards, especially since the pandemic, that a one-step, which is a more intensive meeting, if the seller has time. I mean, we try to say, hey, take 60 minutes. 90 minutes so that we can really be available. And if that works for the seller, great. Because I feel like you really can make the most of your questions and answers so that you can meet them where they are. So I do prefer a more intensive one-step. Let's get to your home, let's meet, let's really build a rapport and a story of what's happening here. But I know I have used a two-step. How about you? How have you seen your listing appointments go?
Similar. I really, was doing two-step where I would hear some information, and then now that I've seen your home, here's what I'm going to follow up with as the second step, maybe for pricing or potential pricing
marketing
strategies. Yeah.
Yep.
And now it's more, let's take that that hearty time together to go over a lot of things, and then I will still do a follow-up, maybe via email or phone call afterwards, just for a couple more points. But when you're there in person, what are some things? Do you have an outline of what you're going over with them? What does that maybe 60 to 120 minutes, give or take, right? What does that time frame look like when you're with a home seller?
I arrive with a binder of things that I have put together, which is basically the process. It includes some of the paperwork, and it also includes some of the questions that I'm going to ask the lister. But mostly, I try to go in and just have nothing in front of me. This is where I start, and I say, tell me like with all those 4 questions that we ask. Why are you selling? Tell me the story of your home. Give me a tour of your home if you would like to. And as we're going through, I'm making mental notes. And then immediately I go home and I make notes that I'm going to follow up with. It usually leads to the next set of questions. How do you usually do your listing?
Yeah, I bring over a binder, and because I get really focused, I really want to listen to what a home seller has to say. I've been doing just iPhone photos just for my recollection of spaces.
Yeah, I do that too sometimes.
Because I can get so engrossed into what somebody has to say and just really want to, burn it into my brain. But then sometimes I miss, really important spaces in the home. So that iPhone is just like my backup, so to speak. But in the binder, we'll talk about, after a home tour, we'll talk about pricing. Again, we'll go over some of the things that we talked about before about maybe what's important to them and the time frame. So just double check some of those items are still the case and something hasn't changed. Or, no, you know what, I said that, but I didn't really mean that, right? Okay, so tell me why, tell me more, those types of things.
Now, I think value probably comes up a lot in a listing. Does it? Would you agree?
Value meaning pricing? Pricing. Or value of what we're bringing to the table, or both?
Both. Yeah. But mostly pricing, because a lot of times I think sellers want to start there. And I like the in-person listing appointment so that you can, validate that they have an idea of the value of their home, and then also to work with them to say, okay, well, now let's use some real data.
Real data.
And then that is always a follow-up as well. Sometimes that's a moving target a little bit, right?
It can be. And sometimes, depending on personality, just too much information at one time. So I tend to start with a broader view of market data of maybe their school district and then maybe their neighborhood. Depends. And sometimes taking it, reading the room as you've noted, and then following up later might be a better strategy. We don't control the price. We're just kind of understanding and maybe disseminating the information and then delivering the information.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that they can ultimately make the best decision for themselves. That's important, I think, to me. To a seller.
So some key takeaways we have: that just meeting maybe a potential home seller where they're at, asking lots of questions, I think, and then diving deep on those questions. What do you have to share?
Yeah,
wrap up.
exactly. Meeting them where they are, validating what they're thinking and they're feeling, and helping, provide as much information and data from the big down to the small to help them make the best decision for the best sale of their home.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, it may not be the sale. It might be, hey, we are staying, and that's okay too, as long as you've gotten educated on, right?
Yeah, what's happening. Yeah,
for sure. Always fun to see you.
Oh, Ayse, you're the best.
Yeah, thanks, Claire.
Thank you.
See you next month.
All right.